Jim Grant has a warning for investors. The editor of the widely read and respected Grant's Interest Rate Observer wrote in his latest edition, "Risk can usually be found where you aren't looking for it." You get to thinking that government bonds are perfectly and unconditionally safe. He is with me now. So, Jim, what are you saying? First of all, welcome.
Well, thank you, Deirdre.
Second of all, what do you mean? Yes, exactly.
Risk is kind of a paradox. It is constantly in motion, is my friend John Adams, not the late president, but the current thinker about risk. Risk is constantly in motion, and it changes in response to attempts to measure it. And what we are now observing worldwide, and not least in the United States, is an earnest and energetic and asphyxiating government program to manage and control risk from the top down. They, our monetary mandarins, want to squish it. They want to let everyone know that once they have identified risk, once they have put in place techniques and assets of which they approve, that the world will be safe. And my view is that, on the contrary, that the rigidities necessary to a program of top-down management introduce risks that we have not yet identified, but will, in the fullness of time,
we won't be disappointed. If we're looking for a crisis, we won't be disappointed. And I know one thing that you've written about is that the fact that the Fed has kept rates so low for so long,
yes,
that it's almost just dared everybody, right, to take more risk, even though, to your point, the reason they did this was to make everybody feel safer.
Right. It was certainly well intended, but it is going on to 6 or 7 years. Nobody's getting any younger. You're just like 6 or 7 years since the crisis, and still we are in emergency mode. But the emergency mode itself, I submit, is going to paradoxically bring closer and not push away the likelihood of another such emergency. Different, of course, because it's never quite the same. But these attempts to manhandle the price system, to impose prices, to manipulate the yield curve, to levitate asset prices by main force, all these things are distorting. They are not.
To take us through the mechanics, though, Jim, it seems like because money is so cheap, right, it's almost difficult for companies not to borrow. So everybody's borrowing, meaning bond issuance is up. But what's happening on bond desks? That's where I keep hearing.
Well, the Fed is doing its all to depopulate bond desks and to reduce bond trading. That's not the.
So that means illiquidity. You see signs of illiquidity.
That's the fancy word. Yes, that's not the attempt to do, but it is the consequence of policies put in place. The great Volcker's not great vocal rule is responsible for some of this. The world talks a great deal about the likelihood of a liquidity problem in the bond market. So, on form, that might not be the thing that happens.
Risk, again, being the thing that you should really be worried about is the thing we don't know about, right?
Right. Well, we should understand that risk is often where you don't look for it, almost proverbially, almost by necessity. We're not.
That's what you don't see coming.
But again, to emphasize the Feds, the government, especially Daniel Tarullo's branch, his battalions of safety-first people at the Fed, are instituting a de facto nationalization of essential banking activities. There's a man named Christian Clausen who runs Nordea, I think the biggest bank in the Nordic part of Europe, and he said it can't be that the single purpose of banking is to prevent banks from going bankrupt. And yet this has become, in effect, the policy of our minders at the Federal Reserve. They are becoming quite all-powerful.
Jim, what does this mean for savers? We keep talking about how they are punished.
It means 2 meals a day.
It means 2 meals a day instead of 3.
Continuing short rations. If by saving you mean the humble yet formerly profitable and even virtuous act of putting money to work at minimal risk for a minimal yet positive return, that activity is still gravely disadvantaged by these policies.
Okay, hold that thought. We're going to continue the conversation more with Jim Grant after a short break.